Hey everybody, and thank you very much for tuning in to the Free Assange Visual. My name's Andrew Smith, and I will be playing solo tonight, so it will not be a normal long vigil. Steve and Josh and most of the team are still traveling back home, so I would like to thank them for everything that they did in LA over the weekend. They had an awesome event out there with the press panel and the march. In DC, we had the awesome time of our own events, but I will get to that later. First, I do want to run through the numbers with everybody. So let me get those pulled up here. Sorry. We have 3,773 days since the illegal and arbitrary detention of Julian Assange started. We have 731 days since the WikiLeaks founder was trafficked from 732 days since the WikiLeaks founder was trafficked from the Ecuadorian embassy to Belmarsh prison after being sold to the Ecuadorian government for a $4.2 billion loan from the International Monetary Fund. We have 98 days since Vanessa Baraitser's January 6 ruling denying Julian Assange bail after ruling no extradition and personally ordering his release on January 4th. We have 1,397 days of federal incarceration for whistleblower Reality Winner. We have 1,328 days of inhumane detention for the alleged Vault 7 whistleblower Joshua Schultz. At least 912 of those days have been spent in special administrative measures. We have 730 days since the political persecution of Ola Bini started at the hands of the Ecuadorian government. We have 391 days of freedom for Chelsea Manning, and as always, she does stream to Twitch. She may even be live right now, and that is XYChelsea87. And we have 38 days of freedom for Jeremy Hammond. He is out at the halfway house and the penitentiary, but he is still on house arrest and has a lot of conditions restricting his personal freedom for the next 3 years. But with that, I did want to just touch on some stuff because we did have a lot of awesome events happening around the world, and I just want to say thank you to all the organizers. We had tons and tons of global events happening outside here of the US, and we had tons of events happen here within the country. We had North Carolina, Tulsa, Oklahoma, LA, DC, and tons of others going around, and we've actually had a bunch of people interested in reaching out to us, joining the Discord to get their own group started. So I just want to give a big shout out to all those people that are wanting to get boots on the ground right now, because it may seem hopeless in this situation where we just got past the 2-year point of Julian Assange being in Belmarsh prison. But the fight's not over. We had more support this past Sunday than we have almost the entire time this has been going on. We have new groups springing up absolutely everywhere. So I'm just super, super excited that we have all of this happening all around the world at the same time right now. Is my audio better? I'm waiting for the chat to tell me if the audio is better. But, so I wanted to actually go over a little piece here about just the history of the Espionage Act and how it's being used against Julian Assange. And it's something that Consortium News put a piece out. So I just wanted to, I'll throw that link in chat for everyone. But I wanted to just kind of go over some of the bigger pieces of it because it is a really, really well written and in-depth article about it. But just for our sake here on the stream, I do have a shorter version tonight. My audio might be a little bit weird just because I have just a different setup, being solo, trying to get all this up and running, so I apologize about that. So hopefully you can hear me better. I did just turn it up a little bit more again. But let me get this pulled up here. So again, this is from a Consortium News piece that they put out on the 11th. The Assange extradition, a history of the Espionage Act and how it ensnared Julian Assange. The Trump administration's first indictment of a publisher opened an alarming precedent to future journalism. President Biden's Department of Justice has not reversed Trump's decision to continue to seek Assange's extradition from Britain, though it could have. Instead, it decided on February 13th to pursue the appeal Judge Vanessa Baraitser's decision not to extradite Assange to the U.S. on health grounds. If the U.S. should win on the appeal, Assange will be brought to the Eastern District of Virginia to face 17 counts under the Espionage Act, amounting to 175 years in prison, as Baraitser challenged none of those counts in her judgment. Possession and dissemination. Assange became the first journalist persecuted under the sections of the Act that make it a crime to have or even attempt to have unauthorized possession of defense material, and separately to communicate it, even technically, or since technically neither he nor anyone working for WikiLeaks was authorized to do so. The language used in this indictment is so broad that theoretically anyone who has shared a classified WikiLeaks publication on social media could also be liable to prosecution. Not to mention that many mainstream media organizations that routinely report on and quote classified material, including from WikiLeaks. The overly broad language means that the government does not generally have to prove the intent to harm the U.S., and only that the defendant, in this case Assange, knew it could. Neither does the possession or publication of classified information have to cause any actual harm to the U.S. The government does not need to prove that publication actually threatened national security. Intent, retention, communication, and person. The main issue involving Assange's Espionage Act indictment and the history of the Anglo-espionage legislations are intent. Whether motive is relevant to prosecution, and whether a public interest defense is possible. B. A person who is liable for prosecution, whether only a government official or normal source of leaked secrets, or anyone including journalists who publish them. C. Retention, whether mere unauthorized possession is a crime. D. Communication. The laws as they have regarded unauthorized communications of defense information. These four aspects of Espionage Act law on both sides of the Atlantic evolved in numerous complex ways over the centuries between 1889 and 1989. In particular, how they have affected journalism. But earlier governments have also found ways to choke out press freedom. And this is where their article, Consortium News' article, actually picks up, covering the history of the multiple different legislations in the U.S. that limit press freedom. But I specifically picked out Woodrow Wilson's statements in 1915 about the creation of the Espionage Act. There are citizens of the U.S., I blush to admit, born under other flags, but welcome under our generous nationalization laws to have full freedom and opportunity of America, who have poured the poison of disloyalty into the very arteries of our national life, who have sought to bring the authority and the good name of our government into contempt and to destroy our industries, whether they thought it effective for their vindictive purposes to strike at them, and debase our politics and use them to the uses of foreign intrigue. I urge you to enact such laws at the earliest possible moment, and feel that in doing so, I am urging you to do nothing less than to save the honor and self-respect of the nation. Such creatures of passion, disloyalty, and anarchy must be crushed. They are not many, but they are infinitely malign, and in the hands of our power should close over them at once. They have formed plots to destroy property. They have entered into conspiracies against the neutrality of government. They have sought to pry on every confidential transaction of government in order to serve the interests of aliens to our own. It is possible to deal with these things very effectively. I need not suggest in terms which they may be dealt with. Government censorship and prior restraint. While the Espionage Act does not impose formal government censorship, its use against Assange is having a chilling effect on the press and the spirit, if not the letter, of the First Amendment. While the Pentagon Papers case, as we'll see, showed that the government cannot exercise prior restraint. That is, ordering a publisher beforehand not to publish classified information. It can prosecute a journalist or publisher after publication. If Wilson had his way, however, prior restraint or formal government censorship would have become legal. Congress a version of the he sent Congress a version of the Espionage Act that explicitly called for it. There was a furious reaction against it in the press. So I apologize about my terrible ability to read, but I just thought that that was some really cool and interesting points that I wanted to get across about this whole thing that I know we've talked about a million times, but just putting the history of it in context I thought was really interesting. So I appreciate Consortium for putting that article forward. We don't have that same outcry from the press, right? The only thing that stopped prior restraint from getting put in, and the Espionage Act as a whole is absolutely terrible, and the only part that really got stopped was prior restraint when the whole thing should have been thrown out, because Woodrow Wilson put his fact that he wanted to censor people forward. So my hope, right, is that people become outraged. We need more people being outraged at this point. And I am just super, super, super excited that everyone that's hopped into Discord with us, that everyone that's organizing behind the scenes, all these new local groups. We may even have our first Texas group popping up, which I think is absolutely awesome. So, with that, I just want to leave everybody with the fact that change is possible, that we can make this happen, and it just does. A lot can happen in a little bit of time. And so what I'm hoping for is that everybody can do what they can with the time and money that they have left. Thanks, everybody.